Mesa Water District Board of Directors to order, and ask Director Bachman, Vice President Bachman, to say the pledge, please.
All rise. All after me. Pledge the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, sir. Now is the time for public comments. Members of the public are invited to address the board on non-agendized matters and will be allocated 3 minutes apiece for those public comments.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure who the chair is. Oh, okay. Chair Atkinson. Or my name is Wendy Lease. That's help. Oh, okay. Good.
Stacy. You have to turn off.
Here, Stacy, take this one.
Yeah.
Here you go. It's on.
Oh, green. Go. Okay. I'll say it. Good afternoon, Chair Atkinson and members of the Mesa Water Board. My name is Wendy Lease. Long time. It must be 45-year customer of Mesa Water District. And I would just like to comment that this is a rather odd time, not really for working people at 3:30 to have a meeting of such importance. And I would suggest that in the future that you consider us working folks and our schedules and maybe have it as an evening meeting when you're going to talk about a rate increase and selecting a new member. I think that would be fair. Also, all the other agencies televise meetings. School board even does these days. I mean, it's delayed, it's not live. City council does, and I think it would behoove you to also, for the public record, let residents know what's going on. Having a meeting at 3:30 is not a good idea, and not even televising it. So anyway, and you only have 2 spaces out there, or maybe a few more. I got the last one. There's not really enough people, spaces if you come late. The other ones are reserved. So, you've only got a few spaces for the public to park in the front. So if you have to use those, you might say, if these are all filled, go ahead and use the reserved ones. So I'm just making the public, more welcome and to your board meetings, since elections will be next year and a lot of people are interested when the rates go up. So thank you.
Thank you. Other speakers? All right. That takes us to the next item. Mr. General Manager, are there any items to be added, withdrawn, or reordered on the agenda?
There are none, sir.
Thank you. Takes us to presentation and discussion items. I see none. That takes us to the action items, the Board of Directors for Division 3 vacancy. We've had our interviews, gentlemen, and at this point, I think we had said we'd like to discuss the lists. There's probably several processes that we could go through. I'm thinking from my own perspective that, potentially taking our top 2 candidates, presenting our discussion on those top 2 candidates for the rest of the board, and we can move forward from there, see if there are some common names among those top 2 for the board, and if we find that we're seeing some commonality, then possibly entertaining motions for the appointment. So if anybody has anything they'd like to add to that, I'm open to suggestions and thoughts. Director Driscoll.
Thank you, President Atkins. Just a question, you're saying to discuss our top 2, and how are we going to reveal the top 2?
When you start discussing them.
Okay.
Each director will present his top 2. We can do it by ballot, actually listing the top 2 on a note paper and pass those over to the district secretary, let her read those off, and we can discuss them. She would indicate then how many votes, if you will, each individual got from the top folks. Those notes become a matter of public record, part of the process. So either way, the minutes of the meeting and our discussions presenting our top 2 candidates, or having the notes go up to the district secretary, and then having our discussion on the top 2 from each director, and we may see that there are some commonalities. There may be 8 different names on the list.
Could I offer just another thought? I know we don't want to spend too much time belaboring this, but it is an important decision. If we were going to turn in a card, what do you think of putting in 3, our top 3, and then having the field at that point? I'm sure the staff could, that vote would probably take it down to 3 or 4 people, and then you have the field again from what's left. Or, I'm also open to just a nomination in a second, like has been done in the past. There's a lot of ways, but I won't do the engineering thing about the song.
Mr. President.
Yeah. Director Buck.
Thank you. So I support Director Fissler's idea of taking the top 3, writing down, which I have no problem with, obviously, becoming part of the public records, no problem, it's a vote. But then that would narrow the field down to the top 3, or maybe perhaps 4 candidates out of the remainder, and then we could winnow that down, and I think in a similar fashion to top 3, top 2, top 1.
All right, it's the pleasure of the board. We're in this together, gentlemen, so I'm open to all thoughts and ideas. Director Dwayne, do you have some?
I was just going to say, how did we do this the last time? I believe last time we appointed a director was Director Fissler. Am I correct? And Director Ole Hall, I believe, was seated then.
Right.
Is that right? And I'm just trying to recall, how did we go about this then?
There was a general discussion and a motion was proffered.
And perhaps that would also work. And since it's been successful in the past and had, should it fail, then the alternative, going to voting mechanism you described, would be more appropriate. I'd be comfortable making a motion and seeing if there's a second on trial to hear the list of candidates that are on everybody's mind. I'd like to say this to those members of the public who are here today. Thank you all very much for participating. I've been on the board since 2005. I myself was appointed in a process you are similarly going through, and it was a bit stressful sitting in the audience, to say the least, when and lots of effort had gone into it. And as a group of candidates, you are all excellent candidates, and it's a privilege, and from my perspective, to see such a great group of people coming forward to serve the community. And it is a great honor, and I can tell you from my personal perspective, I've gotten much more out of this than in some ways I've put into it. I hope you understand the meaning there. I mean that in the best sense, and it is a rewarding thing to do. So the advocacy and the policy deliberation are fun, and the group of gentlemen up here and the staff that we work with are some of the smartest and finest people I've had the experience in my life of working with. So whoever is chosen, congratulations. However it will turn out, it is a unique opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Director Fissler.
Yeah, thank you, Director Dwayne, for saying that, because I too, I want to echo that I don't know who is going to be chosen, but I am certain we're going to get a great director out of this process. I'm impressed by the final list of 7. I also went through this and sat in the audience with 20 people, and had to survive that discussion over 20 people. And so that reminds me how it was done. Directors started saying, well, I like this person, and this person, or this person and this person, 2 or 3 people. We just sort of said who we liked, and then discussion carried on from there. The difficult part, of course, for us is all of you are great candidates, but 15 out of 16 people aren't going to get chosen, or 6 out of 7 today. Already some have been eliminated. And that's just a tough position, I mean, from my heart to be in, to tell people, you know, I have a ranking and I chose these people over someone else. And, you know, I spent a long time reading resumes and we had the interviews. But, you know, I do have certain people that have stood out to me. And I'm willing to state them if that could help expedite the process. If we go that way, we can just verbally do it and see how it goes from there. That's how I know it was done with me, and somehow we came to a conclusion after a couple go back and forth.
And I'm fine with that. I do recall that it was basically a discussion, if I recall correctly. It was 3 folks that were the primary candidates for discussion at that time, of the 4 directors. And so I'm fine with that, if that's the pleasure of the board. Director Bachner?
Thank you. Yeah, this is my 3rd time doing this, so, and yours as well, so I'm fine with that method. I have no problem stating who my top candidates are.
Okay. So if we want to start with a general public discussion of potentially your top candidate or top 2 candidates, Director Dwayne.
But just a suggestion, and thank you for the recognition, just a suggestion perhaps to, it would be appropriate to ask the candidates if they'd like to add in or make an additional statement to the board and get it on the record. And perhaps now would be the right time.
Okay. The 7 candidates that are here, I guess the easiest way to do that would be to take you alphabetically. If you have anything to add or comments that you'd like to make before the board's discussion, I offer the podium to you at this point in time.
Alphabetically, we talked to this,
And it's okay if you don't have any
Are
comments
you
to
going to
make.
call out the names, or?
we have them in our packet.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
might I suggest that if we're going to go alphabetically, we have the district secretary call the names in alphabetical order and have each of the candidates indicate whether or not they'd like to speak or not. If they'd like to speak, they come to the podium briefly and then sit after they're done.
Okay. And yeah, I think that's an appropriate suggestion, and we'll go ahead with that. This would be the 7 candidates at this point.
Mr. Jeremy Davis?
I'll make a brief statement.
Okay.
President Atkinson, members of the board, and Mr. Schoenberger and other staff. My name is Jeremy Davis. I know all of the candidates will say that they are willing to bring a fresh perspective if they are chosen to be on the board, but I think I can safely say I'm the only candidate that has more than 40 years of experience hands-on working in the water quality field, and also earned a California Health Department Grade 4 water treatment operator's license. That is the end of my statement. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Davis.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Marcy DePasquale?
Got the last one right, the first one wrong.
Yeah, I
Okay.
always get the first one wrong.
Hi, good afternoon, directors and General Manager Schoenberger and the rest of staff. Maris DePasquale, thank you for having me here today, and I trust you'll have strong and good deliberations today. One thing that stood out to me over the last week as we neared today's meeting was the service interruptions the district unexpectedly experienced last week. And I think it just underscores some of the comments I had made in my prior interview and follow-up note to you all along the lines of the transparency and professionalism with which the district has handled that. I monitored your Facebook page and articles in the paper closely. There were I couldn't see a single comment that was disparaging towards how the district handled it, and so I think your staff and your team and the directors, you're to be commended on how you navigated that. And I just think that shows the steadiness of your ship, and I hope my readiness and willingness to participate is evident. And if there are any questions or comments down the road, I'm available to provide input. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, ma'am.
Waleed Kazi.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman, Board of Directors, staff. Thank you very much again for honoring me with this second appearance. As Fischler said and others said, you know, everybody in the group is well qualified, and you're going to have to make a hard choice. I understand that, and we'll all walk away with some good experience having come here and talked. And I'm certainly going to commit that I'm going to be involved more, you know, on a regular basis on these kind of, regardless of what happens. My closing statement would be that I personally think this is a position that requires a combination of very strong technical background in the area of water that you're dealing with, including and also an overall business sense and strategy. And I think I bring that. I think, you know, Strothmiller is a PE and I'm a PG. And I think that rounds off the qualifications of the board very well in a field that is both technical and business. And of course, last but not the least, as everybody else will say, I have a very strong desire to serve the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kazi.
Al Morelli.
Good afternoon, Al Morelli. Make it very short. I will be honored to have your vote, and I'm looking forward to be part of the team here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Morelli.
Andrew Nilsson.
Members of the board and district employees, again, I just want to echo what some of the other candidates said. Thank you for your time and your consideration of being brought to this point, a second appearance. One thing I did want to say that I neglected to mention during my interview and I wanted to make public record is I've been an employee of the water district before. In college, I was a water and electric meter reader. This was in a cold climate, and this was before most of those were on RFIs, and so I'd have to lift heavy, cold cement water covers and read them. So I've been on the other side of the extreme, and I would be honored if I was chosen to join the board. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Nielsen.
Timothy Sessler.
Good afternoon, gentlemen, staff. Thank you. Good afternoon. Likewise, I want to express my gratitude for considering my nomination and the others. You are considering it very thoroughly. I would just add, in addition to my interview, that I think I bring kind of a high-level corporate experience as well as city experience in dealing with high-level bodies that make executive-type decisions, as well as kind of a broad, specific expertise in a wide variety of technical, legal issues, as well as marketing issues. I think it provides kind of a broad background to this position. I would certainly hope that you would consider me for this position. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sessler.
Gregory Warren.
Good afternoon, directors and employees. I just wanted to say thank you, actually. It's been a great experience for me to go through this process, and depending on how the votes come out, I just wanted to say thank you for the consideration, and if it's so be it, I look forward to serving the community and working on the board with all you folks. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Okay, that concludes the candidates in the top 7, according to the board's decisions from last week. So I think we'll now open the floor for discussion by the board. Director Fissler.
Sure. Seeing them all again, it's a tough shit. It is really tough. But we need to move this process forward. I do have 3 candidates that I support above others, and that would be Timothy Sessler, Al Morelli, and Maris De Pasquale. Okay. Director Dwayne?
Thank you very much, sir. From my perspective, a board member's role is unique. We are not the staff. We are not the technical experts. And you all have heard me say this, the folks in the room have not. But I think the best interest of the public is served often when those of us who are in this position come at this with a sense of common sense. It does require a broad skill set of transferable skills and experience, a common understanding, a sense of common sense, a sense of humor, an ability to work with others, an ability to seek compromise and find common ground. Within the staff, I would say that we have a veritable Swiss Army knife of engineers and technical skills. The folks that work here are very, very smart and are very well educated and have done a tremendous job designing, with the help of the board, the policies and procedures by which the district functions and acts on behalf of the community. With that said, those who are here in the audience do bring a broad set of skills, and those skills are diverse, and some more technical, some, in my case, financial, some from the perspective of advocacy, some from the perspective of experience and education, implementation. So looking and trying to find how the community and the long-term interest of the board and the district is best served is the balancing act, and trying to find within this skill set of applicants who are willing to serve. That's the trick in this whole thing. So I would suggest for the consideration of the board that we highlight Maris De Pasquale, Tim Sessler, and Walid, I'm saying that correctly, Mr. Karzai.
All right. Thank you, Director Dwayne. Vice President Buckmore, if you would, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. And yes, as someone has pointed out more than once, and I'm the engineer on the board, but as I've often said to other people, I wouldn't want the board to be all engineers. I always felt there would at least need to be some technical knowledge on the board. Prior to my coming here, there was none. And it made for an interesting board meeting to watch the staff try to explain things to the board. And it's a difference now. That's okay, and it's not impossible or bad for there to be only one person with an engineering background. And that's fine. In fact, I think a diverse board makes for a better board, and we've done a very good job here. And the credit rating and everything else speaks well of the board. So I would, my top three, to make this short, are Mr. Morelli, Mr. Nielsen, and Mr. Davis.
All right, thank you, Vice President Buckmiller. For myself, one of the things that is important to me and each of the directors is our ability to reach out and communicate with our division or the constituents that we represent. All of us have slightly different backgrounds. We have different perspectives, as Director Dwayne has pointed out. We all connect with our neighborhoods. And I think that's an important element in our considerations, that the candidates be able to relate to their constituents, be able to carry the message of their constituents back here to the boardroom and share them with us, so that we can make the best decisions for the community. one of the key factors, along with the things that Director Duane has highlighted, the diversity is really important, I believe, especially when we come to doing strategic planning. We need to have that cross-section of the community and that cross-section of technical skills, financial skills, all of the planning capabilities that are so important to the strategic process for any organization. So with that, my top 3 candidates were Andrew Nielsen, Al Morelli, and Jeremy Davis. So with that, I'm not sure that we've narrowed the list down very far, but it looks like we have a top 5 list now. Are there any further comments or suggestions from the board as to the next step? The district secretary, could you identify the
Yes.
the numbers for us, please?
Timothy Sessler, 2. Al Morelli, 3. Maris DiPasquale, 2. Waleed Kazi, 1. Andrew Nielsen, 2. And Jeremy Davis, 2.
All right. Thank you very much. Comments from the board?
Let me run through that one more time.
Timothy Sessler, 2. Al Morelli, 3. Maris DiPasquale, 2. Waleed Kazi, 1. Andrew Nielsen, 2. Jeremy Davis, 2.
All right. Comments from the board? Director Duane?
I'm going to suggest, respectfully for the consideration of the board, that Maris DiPasquale comes at this with the most unique skill set among the group of candidates that has been put forth. Her skill set, to me, is transferable. Her presentation in the board was, in my opinion, simply outstanding. She took the initiative to reach out to the staff, visit the district facilities, has demonstrated a strong understanding of finance, has the respect of significant members of our community. She has an awareness and demonstrated awareness of the functioning of the board governance process, articulated that in her statement. And so with that, I'm going to make a motion that we appoint Maris DiPasquale to fill the director seat for Division 3.
Thank you, sir. Director Fissler.
I will second that motion. I have, when you look at the list of the 5, I like all 5 of them. I think that Maris does bring a little diversity to the board, and her skill set is very broad. I do not know her. I've never spoken to her, but I have seen her speaking to council and planning commission in the past and wondered, who is that? I don't usually get that kind of feeling when I hear someone speak to the council on behalf of something. So I was impressed, not knowing 2 years down the road, a year down the road, the same person would be here. I wasn't even sure if it was the same person, so I went to the city website, Googled the name, and yes, it is that person. So I will second that motion.
Thank you, sir. Director Bachmiller?
Clyde, nothing to say on this. It's time to vote.
Okay. Are there any comments from the public at this point in the board's deliberations before we call for this vote?
And this is nothing against Maris, other than I'm going to make a substitute motion to appoint Al Morelli to the Board of Directors of the Mesa Water District.
I can second that motion. I note that Al Morelli had one more vote from the board, or one more selection on the top 3 list from each of the directors, garnering 3 votes. And his skill set certainly looks transferable, as Director Duane has indicated. We should consider. I think Mr. Morelli's long history of service to the community also demonstrates his ability to communicate with his constituency. So that's the reason that I would second this substitute motion. Any other comments from the board? Comments from the public before we take a vote?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, my name is Wendy Lees. It's not clear, if you could just clarify, do all the trustees need to live in that zone and be a Costa Mesa resident?
Yes.
And is there any length of time that they needed to live in the city? No?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, with that, we'll call for the question. All in favor of Mr. Morelli, signify by saying aye. Aye?
Aye.
No. Sorry, no.
Did I hear a vote from Mr.?
I am debating this. This is like the toughest question ever, because I have great respect for Al Morelli. I'm trying to think long-term for the district. And as you know, I seconded.
There's no bad choices here, Jim.
Take your time, sir. There are no bad choices.
Right.
I think we have probably the best list of candidates that I have seen in my experience here with the
Without a doubt.
the appointment process. So I know many of these folks are acquainted with each of us in different ways, making it very difficult to cast a vote.
I'm
yea
even
or nay.
thinking farther ahead. I'm thinking if this ends deadlocked.
Which you want?
No, this vote.
Yeah.
It could.
It could.
My vote could.
Yeah, it could vote no, and that's fine. There's no problem with that.
Yeah.
Because we have another.
But then
vote
we
to
go back to your
original motion.
Director Duane's original.
We do.
motion.
It's not a finished.
No.
No,
It's
it's
just
just,
a
it fails.
substitute motion.
It's a
If it
substitute
fails,
motion.
Okay, I was wondering, because of Robert's Rules of Orders, if we've had a motion, we've had a complete vote on it, if it could be reconsidered during the same day. I'll ask legal counsel.
Mr. President, members of the board, so what we have is the first motion, and then we have the substitute motion. Under Robert's Rules, the substitute motion jumps to essentially the head of the class. If that motion fails, then the first motion is back on the floor for board consideration. This is not to say the second motion, the initial motion might also fail. At that point in time, it's thrown back to the board for further discussion.
Okay, that's what I'm wondering. So if both of them deadlock,
If both motions fail, and keep in mind we need a minimum of 3 votes for the motion to succeed, then it goes back to the board and the board can redebate and make new motions. It's certain neither of these motions for any of the candidates that are precluded, if both motions fail, a new motion for one of the existing candidates who's been subject to motion could be made, or the board could look at a new candidate. It's completely
So a
open.
person who has already been voted on could be voted on again in this
Yes,
procedure?
absolutely.
Okay.
That is 100% the case.
Okay, then I am going to vote no to go to the original motion that I seconded.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mr. Anslow, for that clarification. With that, we have the original motion for Maurice Di Pasquale, and I would call for any public comments at this point before the board takes a vote.
Mr. President, I do have one comment. If I could.
Yeah, very fine.
Thank you. To answer the question regarding living in the division, Mesa Water staff checked to make sure that all the candidates did live in the division. As it turns out, someone did turn in an application whose name will forever remain nameless, who was not living in the division, as it turns out. So, but there is no time limit that's stated in the water code.
Mr. President, just
Mr.
for
Anslow.
reference of the members of the audience, the 5 divisions of Mesa Water District are shown here with their boundaries on the map.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. So, public comments. Ms. Martin?
Many moons ago, I read in the Daily Pilot an article written by Hank Panion. He was hollering and screaming and saying, "No one has filed for my position with the water board." So I jumped in my car and drove down to the registrar of voters and filed my papers and started coming to this room for meetings. I met Jim Atkinson, and I realized very quickly after 3 or 4 meetings that he was the one to take that seat. And over a period of months prior to the election, I went door to door to door in my neighborhood and said, "Don't vote for me. My name is on the ballot, but vote for Jim." And indeed, Jim won that election, even though I spent 0 cents in campaign expenses. I got about 600 votes.
It's true.
Yes.
I remember that election.
This is the first meeting that I've attended in a long time. And my gut feeling as a former high school public speaking teacher and an activist in Costa Mesa for the last 50 years, my gut feeling sitting back there is that Ms. Di Pasquale is the one to take the seat. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. And I do remember your support gratefully. Thank you so much. So with that, are there any further public comments? Then we'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye. All right. That will welcome Ms. Pasquale to the Board of Directors. Thank you. What's that? Why don't we take a break, and we'll come back to order 20 minutes after. We'll call the meeting back to order. And I think the next action item would be the water rate study, General Manager Schoenberg.
Thank you very much, President Atkinson. This is an item that was carried over from the board workshop 10 days ago in August. The board had asked us, after discussing potential rates and asking us to bring it to the next board meeting, asked us to come back with some options on the fixed fee versus the usage fee. So if our district secretary will bring up the presentation, just have a few lead-in slides and then some examples of different fixed versus usage. So just for some achievements from our last 5-year rate increase, a couple of things the board has achieved is we met our mandated 20% cuts, and we made our way through this very extreme drought without any financial wrinkle, in the sense that during the drought we didn't have to raise rates, and we were able to conserve 20%, which is good. On the financial side, as our CFO will tell us, that means we're having 20% revenue. So the strong state that the district's finances were in at the beginning of the drought allowed us to go this far without having to address this issue. We have rolled off of bringing 100% of water that we use from outside sources to using 100% local sources. This is a graph that shows over the years how we've reduced our import of outside sources, and since 2013, all of the water that we have supplied our community is from our local groundwater wells, our clear wells, and also the wells that have the amber tinted water. And Mesa Water continues to be the most efficient water district in Orange County. This is a list of all the other water districts. It just says A through I, so we're not really pointing out anyone specific, but if you want to know who those actual water districts are, they're in the study that's on our website. But you will see that the average cost or the average amount of money that a water district spends per capita to run their operation is about $600 per person per year. And Mesa Water District is the lowest on that, spending about $290 per capita on the district.
Director Butler.
Thank you. So, Mr. General Manager, where are those numbers from that are used to create that data? Just so that we all have an understanding of that.
Yeah, so we have our financial consultant, Raftelis, provide these for us every year. And really what they're doing is just taking the numbers that the agencies report to the state, how much they spent in each year, and they divide it by the population that that agency serves.
So that's the numbers that each water agency is required to report to the state of California.
Correct.
Regarding their expenditures in the previous fiscal year.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, and then it takes the state a while to compile it, and so that's why in 2017, we have the 2015 results. Next year in 2018, it takes a while. That's the 2016 results.
Thank you.
But consistently, what you've seen is that Mesa Water, runs our district. We fund all of our capital improvements. We achieve our strong financial goals and our maintenance objectives, and we spend less per capita than any other district. So it's something that we're proud. We're financially strong. We have AAA ratings from Standard & Poor's and Fitch, and we have set up trusts equal to the pension liabilities and our OPEB liability. So effectively, we have no unfunded liability going forward. That's been a big topic in the last few years, is unfunded liabilities for pensions. So your board, through your actions, we have addressed those. And our refinancing of debt, our funding our unfunded liabilities has garnered the notice of our Board of Supervisor, Michelle Steele, and she was in here last month to give us an award for our prudent financial activities. And we have the Certificate of Excellence from the Special Districts Leadership Foundation, Special Districts Association of California, for transparency, and we continue to abide by all the state regulations and the added regulations that the CSDA would like agencies to do. So that's a little bit of what we've done through our last 5-year rate cycle. And looking forward, we plan to continue the board's practices and policies as outlined in your strategic plan, fund capital improvements, and continue with the maintenance and good outreach and sound management of the district. There are some major cost factors that are impacting our finances right now, though, and they primarily have to do with the cost of our water and with reduced water sales going forward. But the largest impact is the rising cost of the water that we pump. Every acre foot of water that we pump, we pay basically a pump tax called the replenishment assessment to the Orange County Water District. 1/3 of our total cost is the cost of water, what we pay for water. And you'll look at their increases in the last 3 years have gone up 51.1%. And Orange County Water District has projections which they've presented to the producers and others that show an additional 40% over the next 5 years. So, and those are all compounded, and I'll show you a graph next slide or two that shows that in total the costs are more than double. So 1/3 of all of our costs have basically doubled over this period of time, and we have not yet addressed that for future increases going forward, and that's why we had to look at those now. In addition to that, our community has done a great job when asked to conserve during the emergency drought. They conserved up to 20%, which was fantastic, and we are seeing a residual amount of that conservation moving forward, which is also good, and we're projecting 10% less sales than pre-drought level. And that's good for conservation, but also that means 10% less revenue coming in, which is roughly $3 million a year less revenue coming in from reduced sales. And that will not be made up in any future growth because building is slowing down quite a bit. We're only projecting 0.5% growth in sales going forward. So that's the main reasons going forward. The other, and then here are the actual numbers for the Orange County Water District costs. You'll see the replenishment assessment 3 years ago, $294, and projected 5 years from now, $625, so that's more than double. And that's our largest cost, and I'm sorry, on the right, the 54% is a 1-year increase in our cost in purchasing recycled water from Orange County Water District. So that's happening in this budgeted year. And this is just graphically, you can see the past increases and the projected increases in the replenishment assessment. All the other costs, so 1/3 of our costs are water costs. The other 2/3 of our costs are going up at basically inflationary levels. So our general costs, our payroll at 3%, everything else you can see. The 2 5%, those are really very small costs. Those are the fixed costs that we pay MODOC for providing us their services. That's a very, very small portion of our budget. But everything else you can see between 1 and 3% increases. So really the main driver is the cost of water. We presented the board 10 days ago some various options for capital expenditures going forward, and the board has indicated they would like to fully fund our needed capital going forward. So this rate does that. So with all those cost changes, without any increase, this is one measure of our financial strength. You would see that going forward, our days cash, our total days cash and our days cash ratio would continue to go down, and this would continue on to the future without a stabilizing rate increase. So the board had a good discussion at the workshop, and the option of the 15 options that were presented decided to go with the option to recover and meet our goals in 5 years using 5% rate increases going forward. So that was decided. A follow-up question ensued, though, was, okay, what percent of that should be meter charge and what percent of that should be your usage charge? And what we have currently is almost 20% of our revenue comes from the fixed meter charge and 80% comes from the usage charge. And in the past, the board liked that. We cover some of our very firm fixed charges with the meter charge, but the bulk of the bill that residents pay depends on their usage. So that sends a very strong financial message that you use more, your rate goes up, but if you're going to conserve and use less, your monthly bill will go down, and people will see that. And so that's why we have been at close to 20% meter charge. It's actually been about 19% in the past, but we're showing 20% going forward here. So we did look, so that brings us to right now. And we did look at a couple of different options. 20% for the meter charge. So if you increase your meter charge, we want to basically bring in the same amount of revenue. So if you're going to increase your meter charge, you need to reduce your usage charge a little bit to offset and bring in the same amount of revenue. So what this shows, and I'll take a little time on this, and maybe just focus on the first year, the 2018 proposed. This is for your average residential 5/8 meter charge. And what was presented last time to the board was 20% on the meter and 80% on the consumption. And you would see the basically on the meter charge about 5% going forward. And for the usage charge, the first year is actually 3.49%, and that's because of we really brought the meter charge up from about 19 to 20. And so that first year is a little bit less than 5%. But then you see about a 5% increase in the usage charge going forward. So that's kind of status quo. And that's what the staff is recommending going forward. If you bump the basic charge up from 20 to 25%, that's that second set of data there. And what that represents is what would look like initially a 34% increase in that meter charge in the first year, 5% after that. And to compensate, you could have the usage charge go down 3.5% in the first year and then increase 5% in the following years. And then you'll see on the last option, a 30% meter charge is basically bumping up the meter costs 62% the first year, 5% after, lowering the usage charge almost 10% the first year, and 5% after that. Sir?
So you're saying we could then tell the public we just reduce their water rate charge, water rate 10%?
Correct. Yes, we could tell them that, and they could tell us we raised a portion of the rate to 62%.
The reason I say that, it's the dilemma when, our document, the guide just says strategic plan, and as we've changed the wording, and then I just remember the time the voice of OC was here, and we changed the wording from maintain competitive rates to a different wording, whatever it is today. And they run a story that we decided to give up on having competitive rates.
Right.
The part they missed was rates don't tell the story. Some people take property taxes, we don't. Some people put more on the meter charge than on the water rate. So we just want to be the lowest cost provider.
Correct.
The water rate is only a part of the revenue picture for districts.
Yes.
So that's why I just bring it up, that we could say, oh, water rates just went down 9.9%.
Correct.
But your meter charges went up.
Right. And really the trade-off between meter and your usage is the fixed revenue and the financial stability you get from a high meter charge versus the strong financial message and the true cost of water and water use efficiency message you get from most of the revenue coming in from usage. So that's the balance, and then what's the appropriate number is really a policy decision for the board.
Mr. Schoenberger, we had this conversation before, but have you identified any compelling reasons or justifications for increasing the fixed cost charges of the district?
Yeah, thank you for that. And we really have not, and that's why staff is recommending that we continue on with the 20% basic charge going forward.
Well, and the 20% is actually a slight increase over the...
It's a slight increase, and that might cover a little bit of the increased outreach and ledge work that we've been doing.
Okay, thank you. I want to make sure that both, the board and our members of the public understand that we did that study some number of years ago, 10, 12 years ago, to look at the appropriate cost elements in the fixed charge, and that it is well balanced and appropriate at this point.
Right. So I do have one more slide, maybe 2 slides, and a lot of numbers, so I am sorry for that. So what is the impact on the residential bill if we change the meter charge from 20 to 25 or 30%? And here you will see for a 5/8 inch meter, and this is for the first year, the 2018 rates. Right now, for 15 units, you have about $24 on the meter charge and $58, let's say, on the usage. So, the bulk of the revenue comes from the usage. And then as you increase that to 30%, you get much more on the meter. You get a less of an economic signal.
Excuse me, sir, we've got a couple of folks that want to make a question, I guess.
So I guess on your 15 units, I used the Carmichael Healy calculator to determine the percentage here. And the 15 unit, that's 30% of the bill is meter charge. 25% meter charge is 37%, and 30% meter charge is 43% of your bill. And I have the numbers for when your next slide shows up, and you'll see what those are.
Yeah, this is for a resident who uses their water extremely wisely.
And so this would be 42, 54, and 66% of the bill.
Yeah. Director Fisler, I believe, has a comment.
Just wanted to make it clear to everyone that's looking at this that this bill is a 2-month bill.
Correct.
Average 2-month bill.
Yes.
And I might have missed you saying that, but, because our average water bill is around 16 units over 2 months, so it's not 82 a month, it's 41, I believe it used to be. Might have come down now. Thank you.
That's correct.
So,
Go ahead. May I, sir? And just for the purposes of clarity and for those all watching, recording the meeting, I was going to ask my good friend Director Bachmiller to utilize the Carmichael Healy calculator and translate units into gallons of water.
So 15 units?
Yes, sir. Just to make it
Is 11,221
gallons of water.
Enough to halfway to fill the average residential pool almost.
And that's and so that the customer would pay how much for that? 15 units.
They would pay 15 units. At the 20% rate, they would pay $57.90, and at the
for
25
the volume of
for the
water.
volumetric water,
and $25 to have the connection.
Right.
That's right. So I just
yeah, for 11,000 gallons.
11,000 gallons of water.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
How many gallons for a penny is that?
We'll figure that out right now.
So we wanted to fully explore this issue that the board had asked us to look at and provide you with that information on which to base your decision. And once again, staff's recommendation is to go forward with your previous direction on the 5% rate hikes and keep the mix 20% to 80%.
Mr. President.
I would recall that the discussion of the board, it was up to 5%, not 5%. I know that's a tough one to remember, but the board would still have a choice each year of what the maximum increase could be.
Correct.
Director Duane, you have a comment?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I just would like to make 2 comments. To further highlight the district's achievements, which are notable and noteworthy, I suggest that we have our public relations staff round up the comments Mr. Schoenberger made here this afternoon and connect them to the lowest cost of service. It is a remarkable achievement when compared to the other agencies in the Orange County Water District service area, where we compare ourselves that not only being the lowest cost per capita, most efficient water district in the county, but to simultaneously be able to achieve a AAA credit rating, have no unfunded pension liability, a commitment to transparency. These are all noteworthy accomplishments that have been objectively verified by independent third parties and bestowed the honor upon us for receiving them. So I just suggest that for the consideration of the board and the staff, perhaps we could take that up in the LPAC committee and just write up, and perhaps even a letter to the editor signed by the board president would be appropriate. And then second, I would just like to say, and the forecast assumptions for the replenishment assessment are in fact correct. The Orange County Water District, since I've been elected, has appropriated no less than $500 million for the continued construction and expansion of the groundwater replenishment system. What is not said in the numbers that are even disclosed in how they calculate the appropriation is the operation of the physical facility itself. So those forecasts are in fact scheduled to go up, and it is worth noting that the investment in that water producing project was of very significant and great value to the community, because had we not had it, the 20% mandate and reduction of supply would have been in during the drought. Without that water, we would have been in very, very significantly worse shape. The replenishment assessment would have been down in the 40s. Instead, we kept it at 75%, providing hundreds of millions of dollars in cost savings to our local community. So even though the replenishment assessment has gone up, the investment in the water producing facilities itself is very much so worth it. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments from the board?
I have
Director
one.
Dwayne?
Excuse me.
Sorry, Director.
That's okay. It's no insult to me. What has been mentioned before, and although our staff indicated that growth in the city has slowed recent years, the new buildings now, through the action of the California State Legislature, are all required to have fire sprinklers. All residential buildings, all commercial buildings, and everything else. And what that requires then is a 1-inch meter for the buildings, because you can't get fire flow through a 5/8 or a 3/4. However, the new buildings are now also built to the plumbing code. And the plumbing code now mandates very water efficient fixtures, so that the old fixture counts that we use to determine if you say you got a sink, toilet, kitchen sink and shower, and you add those all up and you say, okay, what's the maximum conceivable demand that I might have on this? It equals so many gallons a minute, and that kind of gives you your meter size. And those things were used to be counted as fixture units. And so you get an automatic, those fixture units were based on a different type of water fixture. So what you might end up with is that you would say, oh, this house needs a 3/4 meter. Oops, but because it has to have fire, now it gets a 1-inch meter. So that house then gets the perverse disincentive to conserve, because they are charged at the meter charge, the basic charge of $59 a month currently, and continuing to go up proposed, and their typical consumption is actually far lower than a typical house, because they have no lawn, no exterior landscaping of any kind, and very water efficient low flow fixtures. So you might end up with 6 or even 5 units consumed in a 2-month period. And so even with keeping the 20% of the revenue at the district at that meter charge, which would sort of give you a 70-30, which gives you a 70% sort of incentive to conserve. You're looking at that. That is not the case for the new 171 new units, I think it is, that are going up across from Trader Joe's, the ones that are currently under construction. Those are all going to get 1-inch meters. They have to. And yet they're going to be charged a basic charge. The perverse disincentive to conserve. And what I've suggested a number of times, and I'll suggest again, is that staff create a water rate that says this is the basic charge you get because it's assigned to the actual demand you placed on the system, which is the water demand that you actually use, unlike the fire line, which will never be used except for a failed system. Residential fire sprinklers almost never actually get used for any purpose other than a failed system, and the insurance companies now have that built into their insurance rates. It actually ends up costing more than if you had let the houses actually burn, which is sort of perverse disincentive. It's sort of weird, but it's true. And so the house is burning, no one wants their house to burn, and no one wants anybody's house to burn, so that's why we have the law. But it still affects everyone. The legislature affects everyone. It affects every water agency has to deal with this now. What it used to be in most of Costa Mesa is 5/8 and 3/4 meters. That's what they are now. But all the new buildings are going to get 1-inch meters or larger. And I'm just saying once again that I think that we should have a carve out, and I'll use Director Fissler's term, a carve out for these kinds of situations where you would have otherwise got a 5/8 meter, like my little condo has a 5/8 meter, and I use 7 units every 2 months. But if I had built that new, that would be a 1-inch meter, and I'd be paying $59 a month for that 1-inch meter that I've never used, can't use, don't have the fixtures in the house to use, can't use the capacity, even close to it. Capacity of a 1-inch meter is up to 70 gallons a minute nowadays. And no house ever would have a 70 gallon per minute consumption. So it's only there for fire service. So I'd like to see if the staff could develop a rate model that shows what I would call a 5/8 3/4 fire service rate. You're forced into the 1-inch meter. It doesn't place the capital or economic cost on the district than a 1-inch meter would if you were actually using the consumption. It doesn't place the demand on the system because the system's already built for fire flow in the first place. So it doesn't actually do anything to the district. But what it does do is it unfairly burdens the customer with an additional cost for which they get no benefit.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Other comments from the board?
Well, I thought maybe we were just going to quickly go to a motion. But if we're going to have orations,
that's fine with me.
I do just have a comment I'd like to get out, so I'm going to do it now before I do a motion, because as I look at rates, this district's been around 57 years, and it's had directors come and go. The issues before us come and go, from 100% imported, as I think said, to 100% local. Maybe they didn't save for infrastructure replacement early on, the new pipes, and it's up to us as a board in the last 10 years to plan for stuff that wasn't planned, maybe not planned for. Have no idea, I wasn't on the board, could have been. But one thing that I think probably stays constant is the increasing cost of water. That is a constant over 57 years, I would believe. So we're not a unique board that has to look at this and bring it up. So the central question to us as water district directors, policymakers, and rate setters, to me, is twofold. The increased rate of infrastructure spending required in coming years, and the increasing price of to Mesa water, the commodity water, which we're talking about, which we supply. So we ask, can we cover these costs by rates or debt financing if necessary at costs ratepayers can afford? And the answer is yes. Our long-range financial planning, our infrastructure replacement planning, and strict financial controls have resulted in our AAA credit rating the best possible rating. And we really strive, well actually, we're required by the state water code. And I don't remember, the 31007 or something like that, to be self-sustaining through our rates. It is upon us to do this through the water code and through our rates and our ability to pay the costs of financing if and when necessary. And I want to say this about the EPA, and this has been in the pilot in the past, saying that I said this about Mesa Water. I am not saying this about Mesa Water. I am saying what EPA said about the United States of America, and I hope they get that clear this time. We are at the dawning of the replacement era across America for cities that are around 50 years old. The infrastructure is starting to age everywhere. I'm not talking about Mesa Water specifically. I'm talking about what the EPA said about America. But our looking outward 70 years has been immensely valuable, and it prompted us to already bake into our rates a dollar for capital improvements, which spins off around $10 million a year. We've looked at 70 years, looking at maybe $700,000 to $1 billion of replacements, and we have $700,000 baked in today's rates for infrastructure 70 years from now. I call that very visionary. That's anticipated costs. We could have an emergency, and it could hit us in 1 year rather than 70 years. AAA comes into play. We have to enter the finance markets. We have the AAA in place. Other special districts don't even have credit ratings in the city. They couldn't even finance what's the word I'm looking for, Director Wayne, but they couldn't access the financial markets, I guess you would say. So we're always trying to strive to avoid adverse effects on the ratepayers. We did this during the 20% mandated cut of our revenue by not raising rates, by using a rate stabilization fund, but we also had the vision to fund. But today we're looking at a new driver, the cost of water to us, the water we pump to deliver. And this isn't to throw Orange County Water District under the bus. They're doing a tremendous job. Director Dwayne explained a lot of what they're doing, and they have saved the retail water agencies in this county millions of dollars by their planning and their investments. So basically, they've ensured we have water to pump. We now, as a board, have to ensure we have money to buy that water to deliver. So we've covered the infrastructure and rates as well as could be expected. But today's subject is the cost of water to Mesa Water. The law requires we recoup these costs through generational fairness, through the rates, $1, per the cost of a unit going on these years to fund 7 years in the future. I think there's generational fairness. There's no demographic segment mining the system, so to speak, getting a break. I think we've done it as fair as we can. We have some ardent critics. We have some loyal supporters. When we do have that rate hearing, I hope to get really good input from the residents, their priorities and the concerns. If the concern is the price, what is your priority? The amount of your bill or that water comes out of your faucet? And I'm going to guess it's a combination of both. But what do they put the most value on? That there will be water when they turn on their faucet is the way I look at it, and that is our system. The problem with the infrastructure is they don't see it. It's underground. So to me, the water delivery system is of utmost importance. The public wants to turn on a faucet and get the water, but there's a cost to make sure the faucet delivers. And to truthfully lay this out for the public, 70 years in the future of up to $1 billion is not a scare tactic. It is the truth. It is actual planning. Sometimes people do a lot of studies and don't achieve very much. We achieve a lot through our studies. And it's long-range vision and planning. And there are some terrible examples in the United States of deferred replacement. And again, notice I said the United States. I'm not saying Mesa Water. So back to this topic. I know some districts charge up to 40% of fixed costs on their meters. They have revenue stability. It hurts the low users of water to have it higher fixed. I'm not saying if those are rich people or poor people that have no way of knowing, just the low users. It also tends to make a board of directors get a little lazy because they have a guaranteed revenue and don't have to get lean and mean and flexible. And I think we've survived this storm. We've hit this point of massive commodity charges to us that we're just going to have to pass on by law to keep this a functioning water district. So I support the 20%. Because I'm torn. I like the 25 also, but I support the 20 because it is the most direct message on the cost of water. So I would make a motion to the recommendation of staff, 20%. Thank you. I said I was going to have a little oration, so fairly worn, be these as I.
Okay.
Can I make one?
Director Dwayne?
I was just going to make one comment, and building on Director Fissler, the rational consumer conserves his most precious resource, and that is his time and his money. And the pricing signal sent by having the variable component at 80% of the district's revenue
connects that in the consumer's mind most directly, and so therefore provides the logical logic behind water use efficiency or conservation, so that they are wise consumers, or wise consumers of our the resource that we provide, and that's water. So I support Director Fissler's motion as well.
All right, Director Buckman?
Thank you. So looking at the 20%, which I agreed with Director Fissler in the motion, I'm still very concerned that even the smaller number of new builds will be forced to pay a higher percentage, far higher. If you look at it at 1 inch right now at 59, and at 6 units at 373, 3 times 6 is 2238, so that's plus 59, and that's 8138. Okay, so you take 59 divided by 8138. Let's do the math real quick. 59 9 divided by 8138. That would make the average built user in one of the new condos on 17th Street there across from Trader Joe's would approximately be about 72% of their bill would be fixed charge on their current rates, and we'll change a little bit, but that's a complete perverse disincentive to conserve them. No, 72% is basic charge. And if they were to go to the meter that they might have otherwise had to serve the number of fixture units they had in the unit, they would go back to, they would more closely reflect the actual consumption and the will of the board, which is to have 20% of our revenue come from the basic charge, not 72%. Okay.
Thank you, sir. If I might ask a question of Mr. Schoenberger, I'm sensitive to Director Bachmiller's argument about the overpayment by these new, this new fire system demand for the 1-inch meters and the overpayment of the fixed charge for those individuals. But if I'm not mistaken, we can create that other level, that other rate level outside of this process. Is that true?
Well, you know, anytime we change rates or anytime we increase rates, that would trigger a Prop 218 hearing. So we can maybe create it, but you can't adopt it without going through a Prop 218 process.
So if we wanted to do it, the calculation and the rate level should be created in this process before November.
Correct, and if we want to do it, the November would be pushed back. I mean, it would take some time, and basically staff is going based on several discussions that the board had when we first had to implement these fire line meters and what the charges were. I remember the board having several lengthy discussions, and the direction from the board was basically to have the structure that we have right now. And so that's what staff has gone with. And if the board wants to consider reconsidering that, that would be something to take up at a future time.
Thank you. So speaking to the issue, I don't believe it would take but about 5 minutes to figure out what this would do, because we all know what the fixture counts for all those. We have all the plans, we have all the records. It would take about 5 minutes per unit. Since the units are uniform in size, it would take very hard to figure this out. And you would either assign them into a 5/8 or a 3/4, and we could call it a 5/8, 3/4 fire service line, and it would be done. And I don't imagine for any moment that it would push the time to get the rate study out by November at all. I can't imagine that that's actually correct.
Well, I do have to listen to staff as well, because they have a certain workload, and
I understand. This
also,
is the most important thing we do.
Yeah, I do recall that we set this as going forward with the 1-inch meter charge for those 1-inch meters, based on the fact that the law had changed, and that it wasn't going to be a significant impact to revenues, because there weren't that many new developments as such going on. There's not that potential for that many new developments. So the next time we would go through a Prop 218 hearing, we could address a separate rate if there were inequities created by adhering to our already consensus on these flat rates for the size of the meter. So with that, I'd like to recognize Director Fissler.
Thank you. Just so I'm clear, I appreciate Director Bachman's passion on this.
Most of
The
them-
1 inch, pardon me?
Most of these are in my division, so they are, a lot of them, almost all of them are now.
Can I get clarification? The way I looked at it, and then tell me if I'm right or wrong, the state mandated fire lines, and fire lines are 1 inch. I mean, can we do a less than 1 inch to these people, a 3/4 inch, or do they have to have 1 inch? And I know that Director Bachmiller is just saying they don't need the capacity of 1 inch. I understand that, but I'm just have a separate question on this. Do they have to have a 1 inch meter?
To meet the plumbing code requirements for fire sprinklers, the 1 inch is the only rated meter capacity that actually currently provides that rated capacity.
If you do a combination fire and potable water service, if you do a separate fire service and potable water service, you could go with smaller potable water service, but most of the developers don't want to bring two services to the house.
That's right. So Director Bachmiller is correct in saying that if you look at just the fixture count totalization in a development, you would need something more on the basis of 5/8 to 3/4 size meter. But because of the plumbing code requirement of requiring 2 sprinklers at a given flow rate for that fire event, it bumps you into that 1 inch meter classification.
In case there was a fire,
yes.
The sprinklers went off,
yes.
The meter has to be able to deliver enough water under pressure to supply not only the fixtures, but the sprinklers themselves.
Correct.
If you were to have that, and only because the developers choose to develop the properties with combination fire and water meters, which they don't have to do, but if they choose to do that as part of their development, then they can. They can provide a separate 1 inch fire line with a backflow on it. Doesn't even have to have a meter, and you'd have a separate fire line charge for the building, which would then be charged correctly for the fire service, and you would have your meter charge. But right now, what we're doing is providing a combination meter because that's what's been requested by the development community, because it's less costly to them up front. But what it gives to the customer at the end is a much greater charge for something that actually will never in the life of their building be actually used except to cause water damage to their building when the sprinkler goes off incorrectly.
The good news is the majority of our meters still in our system are in the 5/8 inch classification and 3/4 inch classification.
That's true.
Yeah, I was just wondering who made this law? It's the state?
Yeah, it was.
And so they're required to have a 1 inch meter. That was just my only question.
Well, yeah, and though it wasn't 1 inch specifically, but it was the flow rate to accommodate that fire flow capacity of 1 inch.
Oh, it was the flow rate?
Yes.
No matter what their fixture count is?
Yes.
Okay.
So it's so many GPM per 2 heads, and then miscellaneous 5 GPM flow, which exceeds the 3/4 inch capacity of that meter.
So if a developer comes in and wants to, we've had the developers come and say we charge them too much to buy into our system. If they wanted to do it separately, they would also buy in again for something to separate the regular and the fire line that Fred says, and then that could add X amount to the price of the home.
Not sure I understand.
So I think if I could clarify, I think where Jim's going is the perfectly code compliant and legal system where you provide a separate fire service line and a separate potable water meter.
Yes.
And would we, Mesa Water, charge the developer more for a unit if it had that separate system versus the combination system?
Yeah, so if we have a development that has, say they came in and had a dedicated fire system, like with a standard 22A, we call it the backflow preventer and all of that, you in theory could reduce the meter that meter size because we want individually meters. Our mission as the agency, because we don't typically like the master metering approach, you could go with a lesser size meter. In the board's last update to our water service rules and regs, we did standardize around a 1 inch service as our standard for district, equally apply that across the district for all future developments going forward because of this plumbing code requirement. We're not seeing most of those scenarios come to us. Very few of the developments have actually done a dedicated fire system within the like the one using the one across from Trader Joe's on 17th Street. Very few of those have actually done a separate dedicated fire system, and it's typically the fire company and the developer, or it's the fire department and the developer who have actually worked together to dictate that. So by the time we get it, we actually don't have any input into what that. The fire department is completely driving that with the city's plan check process.
I guess I'm not following you. I'm not talking about a separate fire system for a condo development. I'm talking about a separate fire line for the units. And I have seen units built in Costa Mesa with separate fire line and separate, in fact, the ones down on 18th Street, I think that's what they did. They put in a separate fire line and a separate water meter. And they did not put a combination in.
I don't recall if maybe it's some years back, but in the recent few years, we have not had any that have had separate dedicated fire.
What I think Director Fistler was asking is, though, if they were to do that, we have a meter charge for a 5/8, a meter charge for a 3/4, and a meter charge for a 1 inch.
Yes, that's correct.
When you put for developments, we call it the asset replacement.
Yeah, the capacity charge.
Capacity charge.
Yeah, we don't charge for fire capacity charge.
Right. So you would have a fire meter. Yeah, you would have, exactly.
Okay,
You'd have a
sorry,
1 inch
yeah.
line would get no fire capacity charge on it, and a 5/8 or 3/4 meter would get a smaller capacity charge.
That is correct.
So the net cost to the developer would be lower if they were to do that. And it would also provide a better price signal to the ratepayer, who would then actually have a lower percentage charge to them. They would have it would be a full price signal, just like what we all talk about. But instead, what we're getting is we have a 1 inch meter that then provides more cost.
And this is something that we could, we do periodically revisit our capacity charges that the board evaluates, and that's something that we can go back and evaluate in future updates to that. Just keep in mind that there are additional costs in setting up those additional services from a construction standpoint and a metering standpoint. So,
Which are also passed on to the consumer.
that's right.
It's all passed on to the consumer.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the lively discussion, gentlemen. I certainly understand it much better today. Now, are there any further comments? All right, I'll entertain comments from the public at this point.
Director Fistler, you said something earlier that really hit home. Tighten our belts. My water bill for the last 4 years has shown a 15% increase in regards to the rates. It was something like total increase for the last 4 years has been 14%, just for the rate of the water. About 5 years ago, my husband and I tightened our belts, and we got rid of lawn in the front, lawns in the back, installed a drip system and a drought-resistant landscape and more hardscape. We also have, under almost every spigot in our house, inside the house, a bucket or a pail. And we use the gray water to flush toilets, to water plants that are in the front patio, and so on. I read recently an article by Luke Money. Water board members increased their meeting pay by 10%. This is not what I call tightening our belts. I found on the Mesa Water website statistics for 2016 that indicate that the directors earn per diem between 20 grand a year, that year, 2016, to 28,800. $28,800. In addition to cost of health insurance, between 10 grand a year that year to almost 17 grand. That's not what I call tightening our belt. I am requesting, as a ratepayer and a consumer of water in Costa Mesa, that the board of directors also tighten your belts and lower the cost of attending meetings for the consumers of water in our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martin.
Mr. President and members of the board, I want to tag along with Ms. Martin because I think Mr. Fistler said what the public wants, and talked about being lean and mean and fair. And I like Mr. Bachmeller's suggestion as he represents the area that I live in. And I don't see why, as he's explained, that can't be a fair thing to do for the new residents of these new houses. Actually, they're single family. But I don't see why they should have to be gouged and not make the special effort. You know, Costa Mesa, we are thrifty here. And we can get along unless we were conserving. I put in a drought tolerant lawn too. I save water. In the bucket, I'm shifting things and it rains, a little water. That's who we are. But you need to set, it's my suggestion, recommendation to you that you set the example. I have done a public records request. I see how you turn in your per diem request. Mr. Bachmeller, you do a fine job. Some of the others, one person said, meeting water issues. What's that mean? Who was at the meeting? Where was it? It's kind of like you don't know that the public's watching, but we are watching. And I think that you need to tighten your belts, cut expenses even more, if you're going to put forward this rate increase. Because we've worked hard to conserve, and this is the reward we get. You know, you guys need to give a little here too. I have a hard time understanding why Mr. Duane can be on both boards and approve a rate increase for Orange County Water District and then vote on that increase here. It's kind of like a big conflict of interest, and I think he needs to recuse himself when this comes to a vote. But it's really about perception. And the public out there, me, longtime resident, we see that you don't appreciate what we've done, and you think that you can kind of slither this in and you've got all these awards, but really we feel a little exploited here. We worked hard and we're going to get a 5% increase in our water bill. Thank you, Flo, for doing the homework there. I haven't gone that far to see how much mine's gone up, but even if we use less, we're still going to have to pay more. So what the public wants is for you to set the example and cut the fat, be lean and mean, and then raise it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lees. Director Duane.
Just like to ask legal counsel a question. Mr. Anslow, is there an exemption in the Orange County Water District Act that allows me to be duly elected by the public to both seats simultaneously?
Yes, there is. And in fact, that has been opined to by Orange County Water District's General Legal Counsel.
And I believe you as well. Yeah. And are there other directors that are seated at the Orange County Water District that are similarly situated, perhaps considering the city of Anaheim, Fullerton, and Santa Ana?
Their process for getting on the Orange County Water District Board is a little different in as much as they are appointed by their agencies as opposed to elected, but the Orange County Water District Act encompasses that.
And however, they are similarly situated in such that Mr. Vanderbilt, for example, is on the City Council of Anaheim and has discretionary authority over the water rate there, and is also simultaneously appointed to the Board of Directors of the Orange County Water District, where he has discretionary authority over the replenishment assessment there, which affects the water revenue and
That's
rate.
correct. It's just the manner in which they assume the Orange County Water District seats is different.
That's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. So as Director Duane asked, and I'll ask a question of our legal counsel. So the specific question that was asked, and I believe I know the answer to this, but I'll ask the question anyway, is Director Duane, just like when Mesa Water District directors vote for the rates, we don't have a conflict because we are subject to the same rates and we're voting for the public generally, and we're not carving out a special rate for directors. Similarly, when Director Duane votes on the Orange County Water District for the replenishment assessment, it is for the county generally, and there is not a carve-out, and therefore there is not a conflict. Am I correct in this?
I believe you're referring to two different things. Number one is the effect of a member of the Mesa Water District Board voting on a water rate,
yes,
which affects as individuals affects them the same as the public generally.
Correct.
So there's no conflict there. Relative to the replenishment assessment, as an Orange County Water District Director, again, he votes on potential rates and rate increases and rate changes for Orange County Water District, but again, he's affected to the same degree as the public generally, but he's in his capacity as Orange County Water District Director as opposed to a Mesa Water District Director. I hope that answers your question.
It does, and just for a clear statement, then there is, because of that, public generally or districts generally, an exemption from the concept of conflict of interest.
It's not conflict, it's really kind of, that's kind of a chicken and egg way of looking at it. The better way is to look at it as is, if you didn't have that, the only way to vote on a rate increase would be to have people from outside the district vote on it, because otherwise it's going to impact all of the board members. So it's not a conflict that is covered by the Political Reform Act.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Director Fissler?
I have a question for my colleague, Director Bachman, if he could take out the R. Healy calculator. And tell me what 2 cents is percentages of 370 cents.
It is 0.5%, a little bit more than 0.5%, 0.54%.
2 cents on 370?
Yeah, 2 divided by 3 cents.
It's less than 2% of 100. So of 370, it's got to be divided by.
Yeah, it's 2 divided by 370, 0.0054. So it's 0.5%.
Okay, very good. 0.5%. The reason I ask is if every board member here,
0.0054.
if every board member here maximize their 10 meetings per month and maximize the health insurance stipend, and I don't think anyone does both or all, but the maximum cost to the district is 2 cents on a unit of water. So that's 370 cents. So 0.5% it costs to have this board guide this district to become the most efficient water district in Orange County for many years running. I would say it's a good investment. I would say that we have set an example by becoming the lowest cost per capita water district in Orange County for many years running. I call that lean and mean. We've taken our head count from 72 to 57, and we haven't even filled the 57. So I do appreciate the comments, but I believe we've done what needs to be done in my mind to run lean and mean. We could cut everyone's salary on the board, in the staff, all that. Just like the city could cut firemen down to, 40,000 a year. I mean, you just have to, look at the market and the priorities and then the performance. So I appreciate the public comments on that. Again, being the lowest expenditures per capita, I think we've performed.
Are there any other public comments? All right, hearing none, I believe we have a motion in a second. Any further discussion from the board?
Could we have the district secretary repeat what the motion is?
Yeah. Would you read the motion back, please?
Going on for quite a while.
I can restate it.
Okay.
I mean, it's just to receive and proceed with implementing actions towards a 5-year rate increase of up to 5% per year based upon a rate structure of approximately 20% fixed meter and 80% variable cost.
Second.
Okay. That clear to everybody?
Yes.
All right.
I was the second.
Okay.
He was the second, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
I'm good.
Let's don't fight over it, fellas.
No, it's up to. That's the important thing, is it's up to.
Right. All right. With that, I'll call for the question. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. You have your direction, Mr. General Manager?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That takes us to your report.
No comments at this time.
Okay. That brings us to director's reports and comments. Director Fissler.
I think I've pretty much stated everything I'd like to state today. Good job by all the applicants. Congratulations to the winning applicant, Maris. And I'm looking forward to serving with us. And I think we're going to continue to do great things, and you'll be an asset to us. And thank you to the board for all the discussion today.
Congratulations, well deserved. Thank you to all the applicants who applied. I think speaking on behalf of the board, if there's anything any of us can do personally, please call on us. This is a little bit of a learning curve here, and we will be happy to fill in the blanks for you.
Absolutely. Director or Vice President Blackmiller.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you know, I'm passionate about this meter issue. I brought it up many times. I would certainly like to see it at our rate hearing on November 15th because that would allow me to vote in favor of the rate hearing. Thank you very much.
All right. And for myself, I have no comments other than to thank all of the applicants. It was a tough decision for all of us. Appreciate all of the effort that went into it and the time that folks spent going through the process with us. And I think we've got an excellent result and look forward to working with you, Maris. Echoing Director Duane's comments, happy to meet with you at any time to discuss any of the issues related to the board. With that, if there's nothing else, we'll adjourn to the regular board meeting scheduled for Thursday, September 14th at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much, everybody.